This time, we all know this is Eubank's last chance.
So what does that mean?
It was always going to be difficult. We can all dance around and want a blue chip heavyweight and this and that, but if they're only fighting once every 12 months, 18 months, then it's difficult for the whole sport anyway.
Stop still, does it? Welcome to Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan and Spencer Oliver. It's episode 22, and this week we're joined by boxer head honcho Ben Shalom, who I consider to be one of the brightest promoters around and the next generation of promoter that's going to take the sport forward. Now don't forget to like and subscribe, keep watching the videos, keep leaving the questions in the comment section below for other parts of the show. But let's get on with this week's show. Ben, nice to see you. Thanks for joining myself and Spencer. You two have had a busy weekend. You've been out in Poland, which is an interesting part of the world.
Yeah.
Boxer card in Poland. Tell us about it.
Listen, it was exciting. It was good. We had Alen Babic versus Lucas Rozanski at the top of the bill for the newly formed Bridgerweight title. So people that don't understand what the Bridgerweight title is, it was something that was invented in the pandemic, actually, from a young boy saved his sister from getting mauled by a wild dog. Yeah, she was only 4 years of age. He picked up a bad facial injuries, and they invented, the WBC invented a new title in
honour.
In honour, and it's a crossweight between your cruiserweights and heavyweights. It's not a bad thing, to be fair, because there's a massive gulf from the cruiserweights up to the heavyweights, and as we know now, the heavyweights are getting really big, so it's good for the smaller heavyweights to challenge for it. And what a fight, Ben, that was. I mean, it was explosive. It lasted, Simon, I saw it 2 minutes or something, but I mean, what a great fight.
I mean, let's be honest, it wasn't like a technically
it was more like a pub brawl.
Yeah, it wasn't Spence Crawford, was it? It was what it was. It could have gone a few more rounds. It was an exciting fight. It was an explosive knockout. I think for me we're a young business. We have big ambitions in the UK, but we also believe boxing is a global sport, and there's certain markets and there's certain territories like French boxing that we saw in Paris and obviously in Poland as well. We see them come out. We went to Albania in the summer with Florian Marku. These guys will do anything to come to an event in the UK, and for us as we grow as a business, it's more understanding those markets, understanding how events translate over there, and that's what it was. It was an event that was exciting for Poland. It was on every national TV station out there consistently. It was 24/7, and it was special to witness and be a part of. I think as a business, we learnt a lot from the experience. We learned how to do shows. I think, look, ultimately it's difficult when you've got a card for a Polish audience to make it translate for the UK audience as well. It's not the same fighters. It's not the same taste. I think there were 2 English fighters on that whole card in Jamie TKV and Steve Woodall, and that was it. And that means it's difficult. Obviously, Babic and Bakole are very well known in the UK. That's a learning in the sense of it is different markets, it's different horses for courses. Obviously, budgets are different, crowds are different. The way people interact is different. You saw in there, it was almost like a rave, wasn't it? It was.
I mean, it was a real carnival atmosphere, and I think that it brought big time boxing back to Poland, which is needed as well. And Rozanski is a big star over there. They like him a lot. He's getting on in age now, and he is what it says on the tin. He's one of those, Simon, and you're right in what you say. Technically, that neither guy are particularly good. They just love having a brawl. And I think how that fight was won and lost was because Alen Babic tried to box, and that's not his game. He just likes to go out there and have a tear up. I mean, but from a crowd's point of view, they absolutely loved it. Like I say, it was a carnival atmosphere. It wasn't the most technical, but the crowd absolutely loved it, and the whole show actually.
Yeah, for them it was Christmas. It was like we were superstars that we just arrived and we were.
How big was the audience? How many people in the auditorium?
I would say about 4,000 in there, but completely sold out. If we could have found a bigger arena, we would. Again, this place isn't catered for massive shows and massive arenas, but it was a special experience. The mayor was involved. I mean, everyone in Poland that was involved in sport, ministers of sport was there. It was crazy to see. And Rozanski's a big star over there. For us, it was about Martin Bakole and Jamie TKV, who both had very impressive performances, who both, I think, can have a huge year in the heavyweight division. But yeah, when we do go to these shows and we do try things, it's I'll be honest, we're a young business. We are breaking new territories, breaking new grounds, trying different things. Sometimes it's not always going to be.
So what was the takeaway then? On the basis of going there and doing something different and doing it for different reasons and looking at different commercial outcomes and trying to build an underlying platform for you to leap off, what was your takeaways from it?
I think for us, it's you build Polish shows for Polish audiences,
right,
and you build UK shows for UK audiences. Yes, on the big nights and the big events, when for instance it's a huge world title fight and it makes fights easier to make. What we're trying to do is create an infrastructure across different territories where fights are easy to make because you've got different broadcasters in a pot together. But I think ultimately, as I say, Polish audiences want Polish fights and UK want UK. And so whether we'll start to do shows just for Polish TV over there separately, that might be one of the learnings that we take.
Also, I think what was really good for your younger stable coming through, Jamie TKV is a great example, is a young, good heavyweight prospect, but that for their development is brilliant. Getting that international experience prepares them for where if they've got to go for a title shot and they have to do it on foreign soil, they've already been there before, and that is really important in a young fighter's career. So I think that's what they would take from it.
That's a huge point as well. What Spencer said is huge. I don't think often you get opportunities as a fighter, as a young professional, to go into a lion's den atmosphere, to go into an uncomfortable experience. Dan Aziz had to do it in Paris and fight for the European title against a Frenchman over there. Lauren Price had to do it in Paris. Those are experiences now, if you speak to those fighters, that they hold.
Find invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think for the rest of their careers, that will stand them in very good stead. For us, it's like we feel like at cruiserweight, a light heavyweight, a super middleweight, and middleweight, it's been easy for us to get into and we're strong. But when we're trying to build in the heavyweight division, we look at Lawrence Okoli and Richard Riakpo, and they're two huge cruiserweights that could end up at heavyweight. But that's where you see perhaps there is, as you said, 20 stone Martin Bakole, and you get bigger guys than that. It's difficult for a guy like Alan Babic in a ring with someone.
Well, you lead me into Bakole because obviously there's been a lot said over the weekend. And it was a lovely, elegant conversation that you had with Dillian Whyte. I thought it was wonderful. I learnt lots on it. And obviously Dillian has lots of opinions about his activities outside the ring.
Yeah.
But Ben, Bakole.
Yeah.
Tell me about him. Talk to me about him.
Look, for me, when again, the heavyweight division is the marquee division.
Yep.
And so whether it's Fraser Clark, whether it's even Jamie TKV, whether it's Martin Bakole, we want to invest in the heavyweight division. And with Martin Bakole, we have one of the most talented heavyweights in the world, in his 20s, and primed to take position and primed to fight for world titles. Of course, he's not going to be the opponent of choice for anyone. He's not a huge commercial star.
He's the chairman of the who needs him, who wants him.
He is, but he's very talented. And what we're starting to see, though, now, because he now actually has a broadcaster and promoter, and remember, this is a business, not just a sport, unfortunately, and we'll get into that, because is there any meritocracy in boxing? Should you actually be able to fight your way to the top? Even if you're not mates with a promoter, or you're friends with a trainer, or you're friends with the governing body, should you be able to fight your way to the top and force mandatories? And that's what Martin Bakole will ultimately have to do. However, obviously, he does have a promoter and broadcaster behind him. I think everyone's starting to see he is a character. He is a lovable guy, and he's based in Scotland now. He's fallen in love with Scotland. He lives up there with Billy Nelson. They're a partnership that we're invested in, and we think that he's going to get his opportunities in no time. And he's done the hard work, and now it's just the big fights. But
can you? I mean, obviously there's an indication in his mind that he can start calling out people like Dillian Whyte. And what do you think to that? Is that something you want to do? Is it something you think you can do?
I think fans would like the Dillian Whyte fight, but it goes back to the point again. I don't think many fighters want to fight Martin Bakole. They might say they do. They might, they might look as though they're talking to him. I don't think they want to. I think his opportunities have to come through governing body positions and mandatories until he's had 2 or 3 big nights on Sky Sports, and he's demanding those audiences.
So if you can't make him against Dillian Whyte, who can he be made against?
Look, I've seen a lot of talk around the Michael Hunter rematch. I've seen a lot because that is his only loss, and that would be the natural place to start. For Martin, he has to start calling out the names. It's the age-old boxing thing. You've got to get your name amongst the big names, especially on the big platform. And I think that's all it is. It's tongue-in-cheek. Yes, he wants the big fights. I would love the Dillian Whyte fight. But if Dillian doesn't take it, I think you'd be looking at a Hunter rematch. You'd be looking at maybe Joseph Parker. But I think that's the one that really makes sense to keep building the profile of Martin Bakole and turning him to a credible heavyweight at the top level.
Because am I right that Eddie Hearn had a little bit of a swipe at you because you talked about making him with Deontay Wilder?
Yeah. Look,
what's your reaction to that?
To be honest, one, it did what we wanted it to do and get his name in and amongst Wilder. I think the fact that people are reacting is great, but when you and it goes back to what we just said. Is it a sport or is it a business? And I think the fact that that proposition is laughable shows this is more of a business than a sport. Let's be honest. We're realistic. He's number 2 in the WBA, and Deontay Wilder's number 1. Deontay Wilder's become number 1 without even fighting, but he's number 1. Therefore, if Usyk is ordered against Daniel Dubois, a natural step for a governing body, according with rules and regulations, would be an interim title or a final eliminator. When we are calling for that, that is because on a technical basis, that is what we have the right to call for. And Martin Bakole wants his names in amongst it. Of course, we understand the unfortunate reality of boxing is that unless it generates huge amounts of money for the other fighter and they see it as a risk-reward thing, then it's not going to happen. But we hope over time, and this takes time, that the sport can become a place where you can fight your way to the top, and fighters are fighting regularly enough and forced to fight regularly enough where it doesn't matter if you lose, because the combination of waiting for 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, once you're at that level for a massive fight that because of the money that it pays, and the fact you're inactive and not fighting, for me holds back the sport. If the sport is so competitive, is so invaluable, it has as is valuable, it has no language barrier all around the world. If fighters fought more regularly and there was that clear path and there was that meritocracy for when fighters turn over in the middle of nowhere without the connections and without the broadcaster network, then they know that they can fight to the top. I do believe Martin Bakole will fight his way to the top eventually. But yeah, of course.
The top being what? I mean, we've had this big hoo-ha about where Joyce now sits in the food chain. A lot of it is based upon the performance, obviously, that was against your Joseph Parker.
Yep.
And we know that fight intimately, you and I. And so with that in mind, Joe sort of made his bones in that fight and people started to take him seriously. Now he's found his level against Zhilei Zhang and the world turns again. And people starting to question what they thought Joe Joyce was, right? Including us. You know, we bought into the hype because Joe sort of spun it around into this redirected Mike Tyson quote, which was, you know, everyone's got a plan until you get a punch in the face. And Joe spun that around into everyone's got a plan until they punch me in the face, and it doesn't make any difference. Yeah. So it got spun around. But when you're talking about Martin Bakole and going on a direction of travel, where do you think that lands? Do you think he gets himself a world title?
I think he'll get himself a final eliminator. I think he'll win a final eliminator, and then he'll be mandated for a world title sooner or later. However, these things, the governing bodies will resist it, especially if it's not in their interest, for as long as possible. He's in his 20s. He's going to get there. He has to win fights in the meantime. I've seen a lot of fans talking about, well, why doesn't he take the Michael Hunter rematch? That's on a plate. That's the one loss on his record. He has a lot of reasons for that in his mind as to why he lost.
But then that
makes a natural step. Yeah.
I mean, this heavyweight situation that's going on at the moment, and there's talk of the 4 top heavyweights out there having this competition. Could you see it that, you know, you've got the next tier of heavyweights like Joe Joyce, who you mentioned, Filip Hrgovic, who's IBF number 1, Martin Bakole, who's WBA number 2. Could you see some form of sort of competition for the winner to box that winner taking place? Why? Because why all these titles are tied up? You know, it's frustrating. Like Dillian Whyte was waiting the best part of 3 years to get his WBC title shot. We know politics get in the way.
And that's the issue.
Do you think that we need to get the best fighting the best, and whatever the outcome?
I agree. Well, what's happening is everyone's waiting on that one big check, that one big fight. And so you have these whole host of heavyweights like the ones you've just mentioned, all waiting around. Is there a way, and I'm sure we'll get into it, where we can force fights to happen, where we can get the sport moving? Because the heavyweight division is filled with talent right now. And as you say, we found out something about Zhilei Zhang and Joe Joyce just from them fighting that we never knew. Doesn't mean that I don't want to see Joe Joyce fight Anthony Joshua, or I don't want to see Joe Joyce fight Dillian Whyte. It just gets things moving, and that's what the sport's about. And for that fight in particular, I saw a lot of comments around, oh, how stupid Joe was to take that fight,
yeah.
and also how stupid Queensberry were. For me, I
Opened
got
up
to
another
watch
dimension.
a great heavyweight fight, not on pay-per-view. I have to credit Queensberry for that. I thought it was fantastic for the sport, and if only we can make that happen more regularly and fighters can fight more regularly.
I was going to ask your overall view, because the thing, you know, like a fish's head rots from the top down. In this instance, the other side of the argument is that the creme de la creme is the heavyweight division, and that gives you the marquee position to be able to build a stable underneath it that has real value to it. You've not cracked the heavyweight division. Yeah. You're having a go at it, and I think it was brilliant that you had to make a lot of compromises to make the Parker Joyce fight, to make it happen, because there was a better spirit of let's find a solution rather than find a problem. But how are you going to find yourself in a space where a blue chip heavyweight lands in your space?
No, it's a good question. I think we're young in the market. We're new in the market. We've had to focus on divisions, the cruiserweights. We feel like we've got the best cruiserweights in the country now. We feel like we've got the best light heavyweights in the country. We feel like all the way down we've got the future prospects, whether from the lightweight division with Adam Azim, whether it's Caroline Dubois in the women's sport, whether it's Callum Simpson even in super middleweight, but Buatsi, Bakole, Whitaker. We feel we're very, very strong. The heavyweight division, historically, is difficult to break into immediately because of Anthony Joshua has had long-term association with Matchroom, and Tyson Fury with Queensberry. And we always have opportunities, whether we want to pick up heavyweight fights and fighters later on in their career and things like that, which we're trying to resist. What we want to do is invest in young heavyweights, and invest in heavyweights that aren't getting the opportunity, that then get the benefit of our platform that we think can go to the top. And that's why, as I say, Fraser Clark and Martin Bakole are important to us. We do have a plan with the heavyweight division and where we feel we're going to end up, and we feel it's a natural course for us. And but yeah, as it stands, or as a fan and as a promoter, the heavyweight division becomes easier for everyone if the heavyweights are actually fighting each other. Yeah. If everyone's just, how often are they actually fighting? So we can all dance around and want a blue chip heavyweight and this and that, but if they're only fighting once every 12 months, 18 months, then it's difficult for the whole sport anyway. Still, so that's my take on it. And the heavyweight division is something that was that the plan
always with Boxer, like to get the kids from the grassroots and develop them, as opposed to getting the kids that are like sort of at the top now?
Yeah, like we just have to be realistic, and we always have been. No one even knew who we were before we got a major network deal, because we had to set the foundations and accept where we're at and work step by step by step, and we're still in that process.
But you have got a major broadcast deal. You've got the broadcast deal, haven't you? In terms of the blue chip promoter. Yeah. So are they looking for that circle to be squared?
I think they are realistic. We have two heavyweight stars in this country. Stars. One is Anthony Joshua, in my opinion, and one is Tyson Fury. They're with other promoters. They don't fight as often as we'd like, and so it's our job to find the stars of the future, and that's what we're focused on. Whether that is a light heavyweight, a cruiserweight, a super middleweight, or a heavyweight, that's where we're focused on. And we want to create new names. We've had so many opportunities and I won't name names because I don't want to be offensive. It's very easy for us to put on a heavyweight clash like we've seen on Sky in the past few years. We can. No problem. A lot of these guys are free agents. It's just not the route.
But contractually, no fighter is aligned to a promoter forever, are they? And ultimately, there are other fighters out there, other heavyweights out there, like Daniel Dubois, with all due respect to Frank and so on and so forth. There might be people that would be interesting to you at some point.
Yes, that is true. But I don't want to talk about other promoters' fighters. We do have a plan for the heavyweight division. It's an exciting division, and it's an exciting plan. In the meantime, and in the next 6 months, in the next 12 months, all I'm trying to encourage is that fighters fight each other, because opportunities then happen and more heavyweights get opportunities. I believe Fraser Clark will be a box office star. I think the interest in his career already after 6 fights is almost ludicrous, given the expectation and where he's at in his career. We want to invest in heavyweights that we feel that we have a journey with, that we can develop with, that are right for our business and they're right for the platform.
When you hear Eddie Hearn have a little swipe at you about the suggestion that Bakole fights Deontay Wilder, it leads me into the question that's inevitable. because you're the next one off the rank. You're a potential disruptor, and you're going to get people at it. Like other promoters at different stages in their lives have got other people at it. Frank Warren got Terry Lawless and Mickey Duff and Jarvis Astaire at it. Eddie Hearn's picked up from his father's business and taking it to the next level. What's your relationship like with Frank Warren and with Eddie Hearn?
Look, when you decide that you want to go into boxing, and I did that, I've never had a job in anything else. I did that from a young age. You have to accept that, one, you've got to have thick skin, and two, it's going to be a hard road. And these guys have been running the sport for twice my age, longer than I've been alive. So it was always,
so what does that mean? It
was always going to be difficult, and it was always going to disrupt a few feathers, us coming into the market, because that naturally, business doesn't accept that and doesn't want that. I think for us, we try to work extremely well with other promoters. We work with so many now. With George Warren, I have a good relationship. I've done plenty of fights with him. With Frank Smith, I like to think we have a okay relationship.
Eddie Hearn's bag carrier.
It's difficult because it's difficult for us because we want to have a good relationship and we want to make fights, but at the same time we don't want to have our pants pulled down. I think we believe that if you are a promoter in boxing and you just want to put other promoters out of business, and that you don't and all it is about putting them down versus us, then you don't have the interest of the sport at heart, because the sport will never be governed by will never be owned by one promoter, and I can say that absolutely categorically. So if you don't make an attempt to have good relationships with other promoters, you can forget about it. And that's what's driving the sport apart. That's why fighters don't fight as often as they should. That's why fights don't get made as often as they should. That goes for networks as well as promoters. And I've seen DAZN now trying to, especially in the US, a different strategy, because you see what happened in the US when you almost get extremely confrontational with other promoters and everyone gets their guard up. We try and take risks. We say Joseph Parker go and fight on BT. We don't mind having our pants pulled down. We don't mind, looking like we're taking one for the team, because the sport, promoters have to care about the sport. And I think we're in the 21st century now. It's not Don King against Bob Arum in the US, where nothing, it's almost a Cold War. I think we have to go away from that, and I think the younger promoters, I'm confident, and I think with the right intentions for the sport, it will happen. And we do try and stay out of it, and we do try and.
Do you think they give you, not that it's their job to do this, but out of curiosity, do you think they give you due respect? Do you think they give you a fair opportunity to do deals with them? Do they treat you in the right fashion, insofar as business can treat anyone in the right fashion? Do you pay too much for fighters sometimes, in terms of some of the deals that you've done that might antagonise some of the deals that they try to do with you?
I think in the history of the sport, or in the history of business, you pay to get your way into the market. I wouldn't say that's a fair comment. I don't think we overspend. I think we've got the smallest budget in the UK out of any of the three promoters. I think respect has to be earned as well. And I'm not, I don't sit here thinking, oh, I wish we could do more fights together. I wish it is what it is.
I think historically, boxing has been one of those sports when you get a new guy, a new kid on the block, people try and push them out. They try and block it, because they don't like change. Promoters don't like change. You're in that stage right now.
But believe me, you see what's going on now. Imagine what it was like when I tried to get my promoter's license, or imagine when it was like when I tried to get. It was a lot worse than this, and it was a lot more underhand. If I wasn't resilient or understood how to deal with that, I wouldn't be in the position that I am now. People can now see it publicly because we have a higher profile and we have more weight, and maybe because we're gaining more fighters and we're putting on bigger shows, maybe it looks like from a public perception that it's heating up. But this has been my life since 23, 24 years old. I wish to anyone to go and try and get into the boxing industry as a boxing promoter and see how it goes. There's a reason why in the past 30, 40 years in both the US and the UK, no one's sort of broke in.
When I look at, you can't have been very pleased. I'm going to cover Amir Khan on a different subject matter. Now, there's only certain parts of it you will talk about and certain parts you won't. But I'm just going to address it now because we're talking about our relationship with other promoters. You can't have been overly pleased with some of the observations that were made by Eddie Hearn about what you must have known, what you did. You were very, you came on the show that I do with Jim Whyte. As soon as the news broke about the UCAD situation surrounding Amir Khan, Eddie was very vociferous about what you knew, what the broadcaster knew. That can't have made you particularly pleased to have heard that, because it's directly contradicting what you say. It's reputationally based and damaging.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, you don't mind putting up with a lot, but when it is clearly untrue and it is damaging, as you say, that's when you have to stand your ground and take action. And I don't. Again, it's ideal for the sport that I can have a relationship with Matchroom and that I can have a relationship with Queensberry to make fights. It's not in my interest to fall out. We'll do whatever we can not to fall out. Sometimes we get dragged into it. Sometimes things are said in such a way, so repeatedly that you have no choice to defend yourself. I think on that occasion, of course, I think that's way over the line. I think he'll know that. But again,
what are you going to do about it?
I'm not gonna sit here and complain and wish things should be different. It is what it is.
Feels like a defamation claim to me.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Chris Eubank Jr. Where are we with this fight?
Well, I've been saying the fight's done for a long time.
Yeah.
It is done, and we'll announce it this week. It's a rematch that, for me, feels a lot easier. I remember when we announced Eubank Smith, and at the time, I couldn't believe the reaction was, this is a mismatch.
Yep.
Liam Smith is too small. Eubank is too strong. Look at Eubank, how he dealt with George Grover, super middleweight. How was Liam Smith going to get anywhere near him? And yet there was a lot of the insiders knew that this was a serious fight, and Liam Smith was probably the slight favourite. Obviously, how it went down was a surprise to everyone. But what I mean was, it was to the casual fan a difficult sell. This time, and by the time fight week came along, it went through the roof. Obviously, we know what happened, and it shouldn't have happened, but it went through the roof. Sure. This time, I think we all know this is Eubank's last chance.
Yeah,
and that's what makes this so
big.
When's the fight?
Yeah.
It's the middle of June 17th.
And where?
Manchester Arena.
Okay.
Also, do you think, because that fight was so conclusive last time, do you think it will still capture the public imagination like it did the first time with it being so one-sided?
I think Eubank is a star attraction, and now people know who Liam Smith is after what a conclusive thing. For me, the same people that are saying Liam Smith had no chance, and then now one saying that Eubank has no chance. Yeah. For me, there was two training camps that were brutal that Eubank had to go through back to back, and that can't do very well for your resilience. That can't do well for your hydration. And for me, it was his body was a shell of its former self. If he can correct that, I think, and show the resilience that we know, we're in for a hell of a fight, and that's when it goes. I really still think, yes, Liam Smith's slight favourite, but if Eubank has a better camp and looks like the Eubank we have always seen, it's going to be a 12-round war.
I think that Eubank really has no other option to go down that route. When they were talking about that Conor Benn situation, that Conor Benn option, I was like, please don't go down there, Chris. You're going to do yourself no favours there with the murky water that's surrounding Conor Benn at the moment.
Were you worried that situation? Were you worried that the situation was going to take precedence and that he was going to take the Conor Benn route?
I mean, there were talks of us getting. We had a contractual right. There were talks of us being paid out. But
you'd have taken steps like that.
No. But I'll be honest. I was concerned. Everyone knows how I felt about that. I thought it was until it had been dealt with, and now it's in UCAD's hands. Yeah. Now no one even really needs to talk about it anymore. They'll decide whatever happens, and we don't know, and hopefully they'll find out. Yeah. But at the time, it didn't seem right, and that's what I was most concerned about. Was like, is this fight really going to happen? Yeah. You know, we've got so many things going on in boxing at the moment, and so much bad press. I didn't think it was something the sport needed. That's why I was relieved. But this is a contractual obligation.
Do you think there's an appetite for this fight going, like the rematch, with the way that the first one went? Like you say, a lot of people, you know, Eubank was an overwhelming favourite in the first one, but the way that it was done, do you think the public, that will still capture the public?
I think let's look at the bookies' odds when this is announced tomorrow. I think you'll be very, very surprised as to how people feel about this fight.
I mean,
so it's announced tomorrow.
Post the fight, great little scoop there, Spence. Well done, you little Woodward and Bernstein. But post the fights, I was not interested in seeing this fight again.
Yeah.
And I felt that Liam Smith had earned the right to go in a different direction, and maybe have a world title chance, because that would be, for me, the elegant thing. Eubank told everybody, and everyone knew it was smoke and mirrors. they only need to be 60%. They could eat Kentucky Fried Chicken all
Yeah.
month. But I just think the Eubank factor and the intrigue about whether he's going to come back and do something compelling, because he's made a case for the fact that he wasn't in the right condition and ultimately he could have carried on in that fight. I don't think he could have carried on any longer.
Ben nailed it, though. Ben nailed it, as in the way that he drained his body before that previously to get down to that 157 to make that Conor Benn fight. That is taxing on the body. The punch resistance definitely goes. We saw it, to use a prime example, we saw it with Roy Jones Jr. when he moved up to heavyweight and he come back down to light heavyweight to boxer Antonio Tarver. He was never the same fighter again. He lost that punch resistance. It didn't work, and I think the time scale of that you could see was clearly affected. Eubank, who we know is durable, we've seen that. George Groves is one of the hardest hitting super middleweights, and he soaked up some punishment against Groves. And I think what we saw against Liam Smith was when Smith was hitting him, it was like someone was hitting him with a baseball bat. You could see him shaking to the soles of his boots with simple shots like jabs. I knew that the effects of what had happened with that Conor Benn situation, like the draining his body down to that weight, had definitely left a toll on his body. He's now had some more time. His body may have recovered better. So it does make it interesting. Still an interesting fight.
I do. I think it's an interesting fight.
Yeah, it's a great fight.
I mean, I would have liked to see, because I'm a big fan of the Smith family, I'd like to see them get their just rewards. I think Paul was very unlucky during his career.
Yeah.
I think Callum was obviously won a world title, and so with that in mind, it's a slightly different dynamic.
Liam's been a world champion.
And Liam's been a world champion as well.
I think he feels he's almost ticked every box. But you're right. He perhaps he can fight for a world title now at middleweight.
I think he's earned the right. I think it's more even about the financial gain, the pay-per-view status and everything else. I think that Liam's earned his stripes to do that. And yes, you do need another big dance partner to go into a pay-per-view situation. But
again, I suppose we need to conclude this conversation because ultimately it's going to have an outcome. What happens to the winner and what happens to the loser? So let's start with Eubank. If he wins, are we moving towards a third fight because Liam's going to turn around and say, well, that's 1-1, thanks very much? Where does it go? What direction of travel does that go in?
For me, it's always hard to look beyond the fight. There's no contractual obligation to either fighter. Look, traditionally, Eubank will always take the biggest names. That's what he likes to do, whether that's Kell Brooks or Conor Benn. That's usually, I think for Liam Smith, we're in talks with Tim Tszyu from Australia, and we're looking at what's going to happen with the Charlo situation there. We've obviously we were ordered to fight Janibek for the world title. If it wasn't for this contractual obligation, that would have been considered. That will probably still be there after this fight as well. So there's lots of options for Liam Smith. Kell Brook is calling out the winner of this fight. There's lots of options. I think ultimately why there's so much riding on this is, I think for Eubank Jr.,
it's his career.
It's his career.
It's his career on this.
It's his career.
But with due respect, that's what he said last time.
Yeah, but that's why he has a rematch clause, because I think he realised, and that's why sometimes, although you say, oh, he doesn't deserve a rematch and this and that, when you're that, he's just created a box office star. Liam Smith, after this fight, will be standalone a box office star. That's been created by Eubank Jr. So he's taken a huge risk. He's not an idiot. He knew Liam Smith was an exceptional fighter. He's taken that fight, not for a title, with a huge risk, and yes, completely underperformed and got completely overwhelmed. But he has that rematch clause because he knew that his career was on the line. And that's what makes this fight so interesting. As I say, I still think Liam Smith is a slight favourite, but I actually always thought he was a slight favourite. I don't think it changes this time. It all depends on, is Eubank Jr. going to be the same fighter that turned up on January the 21st, or is he going to be the fighter that we saw against George Groves?
If Eubanks pulls this fight off, if Eubanks does pull this off, and it is a big if, but if he manages to turn it around, surely there'll be a demand for the rubber match. Surely, because, you know, from Smith's point of view, the public demand, surely that's the
I believe
most likelihood.
so. I believe so. I think Liam will want us to demand that he has a chance to. But in Liam's head, don't get me wrong, and I said it there's something quite interesting about Liam in the sense he is fazed by nothing. He's been over and fought Canelo, and that week was just, he was so locked in, and especially even on the night, I just felt that he dealt with the whole occasion really, really well on the night, and you were in that arena. It was absolutely rocking. It was
the
vibrating.
temperature went up, didn't it? Absolutely.
And he's extremely confident again. In his head, he's not thinking, if I lose this, this is 100% nailed on fight, which is what he felt the first time.
That's it for part 1 of this week's Talk Boxing with Ben Shalom. Please continue to like the videos and subscribe to the channel. Part 2 will be coming shortly.